What's up, everybody? Hope you're having a great day. Service Business Mastery Podcast. So we record a lot of this on video, and I don't really share it very often. So I decided it was time to start sharing it. This episode happens to be with Mr. Terry here, and he wrote a book called "You Don't Know What You Don't Know," and it's all about buying and selling businesses. And we talk about the fact that a lot of people think about starting their business and start think about bootstrapping it and all the pains that go along with that. And you don't really consider acquisition as a growth strategy. So our goal with this episode is to share acquisition as far as scaling your business or just growing your company in general. And also what you need to do in order to be able to sell your business, to be able to be a sellable business. So let's get started with this show. What's up, everybody? Really quick, I want to interrupt the show to tell you a little bit about our sponsor, Thermogrid. They make this show a possibility, and I want to send a huge shout out to them. Thermogrid, they've got your back. And CRM service, but more than that, check them out. If you're interested in CRMs, metrics, growing your business, being profitable, they have a guarantee. Click the link in the show notes. Thermogrid. So welcome to the Service Business Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Tersh Blissett. Today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about acquisitions and a little bit about preparing yourself if you either are wanting to acquire a company or be acquired by someone else. I'm super excited to welcome Terry Lammers to the show. He's a certified valuation analyst and co-founder, managing member of Innovative Business Advisors. He was the president and owner of Tri-County Petroleum for 20 plus years before joining Regions Bank as VP of Commercial Banking. That's a kind of a cool transition from owner to VP of Commercial Banking after selling his business in 2010. Armed with a vast financial experience and expertise and decades of hands-on business leadership, Terry now works with his team at Innovative Business Advisors to guide current business owners looking to sell their enterprises as well as prospective buyers. So now that I got all that tongue twisting out of the way, I don't want to forget also the book that you have, which is super exciting. I mean, you were sharing a little bit about beforehand, but you don't know what you don't know, and it's everything you need to know to buy or sell a business. Now, welcome to the show first, Terry.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on.
Absolutely. So with that being said, the book that you have, is that going to go to like a service business type thing, or is that just across the board? Is that going to help out?
It definitely will help service business.
Gotcha.
I think it helps across the board. It's about mergers and acquisitions. In my experience, I had the opportunity to buy 11 different companies and grow the sales of my company from $750,000 a year to over $42 million when I sold it. So, just talk about the whole process, things I did right, things I didn't do right. You don't know what you don't know. I will tell you can't beat yourself up over things you don't know, but it is just a big exclamation point to build your team. You can't do it alone. You shouldn't do it alone.
And I think the one of the things is sometimes we use ignorance as bliss as an excuse, but like when you get pulled over and you say, "Oh, I didn't know it was speed limit was 45. I thought it was 80." You're like, "Well, ignorance is an excuse." Whenever the same with the IRS, they're like, "Oh, ignorance is an excuse." But It really does suck whenever you're starting a business and you don't know what you are supposed to know. And then after you know it, you're like, if I'd known that 5 years ago, you know, my life would be completely different right now.
That's right. And most of the time, what you don't know is costing you a lot of money.
Yeah, totally, completely. Or employees or hair like me. So.
I'm I'm getting there.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I've been here a long, long time. But so tell us a little bit about the benefit of an acquisition over bootstrapping a startup or
Oh
trying
man.
to bankroll a startup.
Existing cash flow, right? Um, I started innovative from scratch. And again, you don't know what you don't know. It's like, oh my God, I mean, your first day, you hang the sign, you don't have a customer,
Yeah.
you don't have existing cash flow, uh, buying a company with that's been around for a long time is just it's an excellent way to get into the business. If you're a service tech wanting to start your own business, go. All these guys are retiring now. The baby
Yeah.
boomers are retiring, so there's ample opportunities to get into a company with existing cash flow. It makes it much easier to bank, as far as getting a loan to buy the company.
Mhm.
Or like I told you, with me buying 11 different companies, there was some companies that I bought 100% owner financing. Some was 50-50. Some was 100% bank financing. I had 2 acquisitions that I bought distressed companies, and we paid them a percentage of the gross profit for the customers that we retained. So,
So with so um whenever you purchase that, when if say it's a service tech wanting to purchase a business, the the current business owner, should they expect that person to stay or leave, or how does that work? Is there like resentment from the other people? Like I imagine that.
there's a lot of situations. When I sold my company, I had 3 former owners that still worked for me. And oftentimes what you find is they like being an HVAC tech. They hate running the business.
Yeah.
So if you can come in and take that burden off their shoulder, it becomes enjoyable for them again, and they're willing to stick around. Maybe they don't go 100 miles an hour, but they still got the knowledge and the customers that liked them, and they're still a great advocate for your company.
Yeah, I've found whenever we purchased like a one man shop and uh they love the fact that they're no longer on call 24/7, 365, because now they're quote unquote just a technician. They're not the only technician in the whole company, in the whole all of the company doesn't rely solely on them as the one guy in the truck. And so they're almost relieved. They're like, oh cool, it's 5 o'clock, I'm checking out, don't call me until in the morning.
You're exactly right. So it's interesting. So let's look at it from 2 different kind of directions. If you're wanting to grow your company, acquisitions is absolutely a great way to grow, um, versus organic growth. I mean, and nowadays when HVAC techs are so short anyway, or plumbing or whatever,
Hmm.
you're possibly acquiring employees. So that's great besides customers.
Yeah.
One thing that you want to look at from the acquiring standpoint, especially if you already have an HVAC company, we're talking a lot about HVAC companies, but
Right.
a service company,
Right.
do you so there's 2 types of valuations I would tell you about. We typically do what I would call a financial valuation of a company. We're valuing the current cash flow of the company. If you're going to be buying another company, and in my book I talk about it, me and my accountant used to always butt heads. He would tell me, Terry, you pay for a company for the existing cash flow that it's spinning off. But as a buyer, I would encourage you to think of it from a strategic standpoint also. Because I also tell another story in the book where I bought that one man oil company. So we sold gasoline, diesel fuel, lubricants, had 2 and 4,000 gallon trucks, that kind of stuff. And, in my mind, he wanted about $100,000 too much for the company. But one, he was located between 2 shops that I already had. So in an area that I had a lot of customer high concentration, I did not want somebody else buying that
Yeah.
company and
Totally.
becoming a cancer cell right in the middle of, where I've got a high customer concentration area. So did I pay him more for the company? Yes, I did. But think of it from the strategic standpoint. He was a
Mhm.
one-man operation. I already had trucks covering that area. I eliminated about 80% of his operating expenses. And it was really that his gross profit that almost 100% fell to the bottom line of my company. So
So
that was
did he stay on board whenever you purchased him?
no, in this situation, he retired. This guy did
Okay.
retire, but he did go around with me and talk to, we talked about the 80-20 rule. 80% of your profit comes from 20% of your customers. So, we would send letters out to his customers saying that we took it over, but then he jumped in the truck with me at the time and we drove around and, he introduced me to his bigger clients and,
Mhm.
had the opportunity to thank them for their years of service, but more importantly, say, hey, Terry's a good guy, he treated me right. I would encourage you to give him a shot.
Yeah.
And most of the time we would keep 90-95% of the customers.
That's really cool. That's the thing that scares me the most is like if I go into a big acquisition and I'm saying that I'm going to put out potentially, you know, $1 million, $500,000. I mean, even $250,000 is a lot of money. And then you have what happens if all the customers leave? Obviously, there's a non-compete or some sort of non-compete clause in there that they can't start up another business next door. But what happens if they just like poof gone?
Yeah, I mean that is, and that's a worry. So there's a lot of different ways to structure the purchase of the company. So the
Mhm.
one company that I purchased was about 60 miles away from me, and the owner was planning on to continue working for me, but he just couldn't. He was going broke by himself. So he's the second one that I paid a percentage of the customers that we kept,
Mhm.
because if he quit on me, I didn't know, we're in a very rural area. I didn't know
Yeah.
where all these, back then you didn't have road names for your country roads. So I wasn't going to find these customers. So we structured the sale of the company that those customers had to stay or he wasn't getting paid.
Do you still see that happening today? I mean, you said that was many years ago, but how relevant is something like that to today's? Because of obviously you have Google and all that stuff, so you
Yeah.
have email and digital marketing that you can reach out.
It is not unusual at all to see the owner do some sort of financing. It is not unusual at all to put some kind of hurdles into a contract that, if I don't achieve X, then you're not getting Y.
Hmm.
That takes us as much on the seller's kind of too, because
Right.
how are you going to run my company? Well, if you don't
Right.
run it right, it ain't my fault you didn't achieve the sales.
Right.
When I sold my company, they held back nearly a seven-figure number with no attachments to it, but just to keep my attention to help them transition the business over.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of thinking too, was the fact that you as the seller, if you're going to sign your name on that clause and then they don't come in and like they have a horrible sales process, or they come in and they come into town and they instantly get a bad reputation or ruin your reputation, uh you know
Yeah.
you're responsible
Well,
for all of it.
and that kind of goes to the term of the book too. You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Um, if you're out there and you're wanting to buy a company, or whether it's your first one or existing one, another big thing that I would tell you is right out of the gate, don't make a lot of changes. Even if it pains you to see the way the previous person was doing it,
Yeah.
let those customers get used to you. Let them see your face a little bit, and then whether it's 3 or 4 months or 6 months down the road, I think in the book I say a year, then start making the changes that you want to make. But let them gain your trust. But now I would say there's a flip side to that. Sometimes you need to go talk to the customer because it's kind of makes you go grr, because the guy, he had a customer you just acquired quit because he didn't like the way the other guy was doing it. So
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah. So what about what if their pricing structure is just all kinds of screwed up? Like you're basically buying a company and they can't make money because their pricing is all kinds of screwed up, but you know how to price it. You know the pricing structure needs to be, and you're probably going to lose some clients because you're going to have to maybe double or triple what they're charging currently, or completely change the pricing structure completely.
Yeah. So those are due diligence questions.
Yeah.
Do your homework before you buy the company. And you're exactly right. So, what we teach people in our coaching program is, the value of your company is primarily going to be driven by the cash flow of it. How much money does it make? But there are non-financial things that can affect the value or sellability of the company. And it's these non-financial things that, it may not lower the value of your company from $1 million to $800,000. It may make it completely unsellable.
Okay, that's a
So
big difference there.
it's a huge difference. Just so, before we jumped on the thing here,
Yeah.
we talked about a HVAC company that we got for sale right now. Where unfortunately, somebody overvalued the company with them. They tried to sell it to a key employee. That was a crash and burn. Then the guy quit, so now he doesn't have any other HVAC techs, and he's doing everything and it's making it an unsellable company.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And the great point about it being unsellable is now, because that owner is the tech, and you're going to leave. So what I've found with owners who are the techs, they have relationships with all the clients. And
mhm,
so when that technician leaves, who is the owner, these people are still calling for the previous owner. They want the previous owner to come out there and as the owner, you almost you take more ownership, you take more pride in each job that you do, because it's 100% your reputation on the line.
yeah,
And whenever I send a technician out on those same calls where the business owner used to go out there, you get a different feel. Even no matter how hard you try, no matter how great your technicians are, it's still going to give a little bit different feeling than if the business owner was out there.
I think that's probably one of the hardest things for a smaller company to become a bigger company. For that owner to be willing and able to take himself out of that position where he's the
Yeah.
doer.
Hmm.
you know it's a trick. I had to go through it in my business. When I first came back to run the business, I had my butt in a delivery truck every day. Then it kind of got to the point, and you bought a couple of companies, and you only worked when, for us, we have a lot of ag around here. So
Hmm.
um planting season and harvest, we was really busy. So that I would only drive in those times. And then you finally get big enough to where you gotta you're dispatching all the trucks, and then the
Yeah.
next step is you have a dispatcher that's dispatching all the trucks. So but the more you can pull yourself away from that company, uh the more sellable of a company you're going to have. So think of it like this: can you go on vacation for 2 weeks and not take any phone calls, and is that company still going to run?
Right. Yeah. A friend of
So
mine, Mike McAllowitz, wrote a book called Clockwork, and it's basically making your business run like a clock, or clock um, running on its own. And one of your commitments is 18 months after you read the book to take a full month off, because through a month your entire cycle's happened, your bills have been paid, all your payrolls happened and all that stuff. And can the whole business run with you being completely disconnected from the business for a month?
yeah.
And a lot of people, that can't happen. But if you can, I feel like that's much more of a sellable company.
Absolutely. And don't just think, I've had issues before where, um, in our coaching program, we call it the Switzerland structure. So Switzerland was a very independent country, right? Didn't fight in any of the world wars. Well, is your company independent of anyone employee, anyone customer, or anyone supplier?
Mm,
So we had an issue. We sold a company one time where the owners had done a great job. They had two guys that could literally run the company for them. They could go on 2 weeks, and not take any phone calls, and the thing would just hum right along. However, they didn't have any key man life insurance, or they didn't have any gold, call them golden handcuffs to
yeah.
keep those employees there when we sold the company. So 2 weeks before the sale of the company, our buyer was a young couple, and this happened to be a drilling company. So really, it's a service business.
Yeah.
They do environmental drilling. Young couple, he had a master's degree, engineer, so obviously a smart guy,
Yeah.
but he had never done any drilling. So these two guys had to stay or he wasn't buying the company.
Right.
So we spent a lot of time in attorney's fees discussing, are we going to make these two guys sign a service agreement? I mean, an employment agreement with a non-compete and possibly pay them something? Or are we going to go in, shake hands and pat them on the back and say, hey, you're going to be a main part of my team and I'm going to start a profit sharing program. So ultimately, they're blue collar workers, right? They've never signed an employment agreement. They never had a non-compete. We felt like the probability of them telling you where to put the employment agreement in certain places was probably pretty high.
Right,
so we did ultimately, do the handshake, and he was going to put in a profit sharing plan. They stayed. It was not without it bumps and bruises, but it worked. So
yeah, that's a good point you make, because sometimes we'll have, and even when you're not selling your business, sometimes you have that key employee. And so I have, there's this one guy in HVAC industry, he sells $9 million a year. Like, that's what he sells, easily $9 million a year. Whereas most salespeople in HVAC, they're selling like 1, 2, maybe 3 million a year. And so my coach was like, would you rather have one guy that sells 9 million or 3 guys that sold 3 million?
Exactly.
And it's like, you have all your eggs in one basket with that one guy. Like, who wouldn't want a guy that sells $9 million a year? But what happens when you built your infrastructure on that one guy and then he leaves? So.
Yep. I had a former customer. He's actually still in business, but I love to talk about him in my speaking engagements. He had a big business. It was a trucking company, and he probably operated about 50 trucks. He delivered all of the milk out of a milk processing plant. So, 1 gallon jugs, cottage cheese, all that stuff. Yeah. And I mean, he'd going through 10,000 gallons of fuel a day. So, I mean, this is a legitimate company. Yeah. But guess how many customers he had? One. Yeah. The dairy. So would you buy that company? I mean, yikes.
Well, one of the acquisitions that we purchased, they had, and this was an ignorance thing on my behalf, talking about this exact scenario where they had a couple of small accounts, but they had one account that just kept one guy busy all the time, and several times throughout the week, so they need additional support for this location. Well, I picked up this account, and they weren't charging for everything that they were doing. They would have somebody there all the time. And so I was like, X-nay, we're charging for everything that we're doing. We're not a charity case. And within months, they were like, all right, we're good. We're going to go find somebody else. And I'm like, yeah, we lost that one account that was their big revenue generator.
So you would call that customer concentration. And I got burnt on the thing myself. I like to say, when I was young and dumb, I bought a pretty good sized company, and I needed. So it's interesting. I'll tell you, Mike, I was a fuel company that sold lubricants, and I found a company to buy that I would say was a lubricants company that sold fuel. And more importantly, he had a bulk oil packaging facility, which I sorely needed. I was operating out of my old calf shed. And I'm a country boy, so
shit. I wasn't gonna say anything. You're good.
You just had a blank look on your face. No, but
you just see it on my face.
He serviced a mine, and that was probably his largest bulk oil account. And I naively was like, "Well, the mine's never going to close, right?" Well, 3 years after I bought it, the mine closed. So yeah, you can get burnt on that. But so there's always ways you can get burnt. But here's a couple of other things that I've had happen recently that's really important for your listeners to know. One, acquiring another company is a great way to expand yourself geographically.
Yeah.
But I had a company, so we have an HVAC company for sale right now. And I called a guy in an adjacent town, and he said, why would I want to buy another HVAC company in an area that I 100% cover where he's at currently? and I just wanted to shake him. The reason is, if if that guy goes out of business, his business is going to get split up between several
Yeah,
other suppliers, HVAC people,
totally.
whoever. But if you go to him and pay him a fair price for the company, and you and I was also talking about, you can get some really good deals buying companies,
Yeah.
and he goes around and tells his current customers that, buy from you, you may be able to keep 95% of those customers. And what's that worth to you over the long period of time?
Yeah. So what would you say? Because I've had some people tell me before, like, now these are well-established companies. They've said, why should I buy the one and two man shops whenever I can just spend marketing dollars to put them out of business?
I talk about that in the book also. And one of my thoughts around it is, you're going to be acquiring customers that you didn't even know was out there. There was a company that I bought, and they was selling all the fuel to the local refinery, the fuel refinery. Well, who in the wide world would think that you would sell fuel to a fuel refinery?
Good
But
point.
they could take their non-taxable diesel fuel out of the proverbial spigot, so to speak, what they was making. But the gasoline and taxable
Oh
diesel fuel
yeah.
for the trucks has to come from a licensed distributor. And that account for us was over 45,000 gallons a month. So, I mean, one, I didn't even know it could be an account. Two, how would it's a refinery. You can't even get in the place without a badge. And
Yeah.
three, the person that you needed to talk to, if you was going to tackle those hurdles, is actually in Houston and not in Illinois. So,
Right.
so you say, why do that? Because there's probably a lot of clients out there that it may take you, think of the money you'll spend on the marketing versus you pay them a fair amount for the company, and you get that company forever.
That's a good point that you made there, about not even knowing that the customer exists. And then not only that, not being able to have the access to the person that's the point of contact to even make the decision making, I guess, in that
Yeah.
scenario. And I totally get that 100%. I think that most of the time when people have said that, I think that what they were implying was pretty much a residential service company where they could market to the homeowners,
Yeah.
versus a commercial client. And we do both. We're 50-50 commercial and residential. So I totally can see exactly what you're saying there about that
Yeah.
commercial
And I
contact.
mean, I'm not saying, if you're trying to grow the company organically by a website or, marketing, that there's anything wrong with that. And
Yeah.
ultimately, I think it'd be a combination of two. What if you can't find a company? If you're going to hang your hat 100% on acquisitions and there's nobody to acquire,
Yeah.
well, that's an issue.
Oh,
But
100%.
then, so we've been talking about acquisitions quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think it's equally important to address the other side of the fence, the people that are wanting to sell their company.
Yeah.
So the number one reason, so two things really. One, and I was like this, a lot of business owners, up to 85% of their wealth is tied to the value of their business. But do you have a sellable company? So it's very important, think about this. If you're relying on the transition or sale of your company to fund your retirement, do you have a sellable company?
Hmm.
And number two, don't wait before 3 months before you want to sell a company to go find out how much money you need from the company to fund your retirement. I've had that happen twice this month alone, where I got a deal actually tonight that I'm going to. I valued the company at $1.6 million. And yesterday she called me, the owner of this company, that she had went and talked to her financial advisor, which she didn't have one, and I recommended one, but
Hmm.
they need $3 million net of taxes to fund their retirement. And I valued the company at 1.6, and that's without.
Well, that's not going to work.
No. So tell if listeners, pay attention here. Have your company value. Know what a realistic value of your company is. And again, it goes back to building that team of people. And what do you need to fund your retirement? Where is that coming from? And then it's just vitally important that you know what that number is, and your company is of the size, and value to fund that retirement. So, I mean, I've had situations where people come to me and they say, if I don't sell this thing in 3 months, I'm just going to shut the door.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
you know,
That's
that's
tough.
sad.
That's a hard conversation to have. I had a business partner one time, and he was like, "You think you can buy me out in 2 weeks?" And I was like, "That's not how this works."
Yeah. But that being said, if you have your ducks in a row, it can happen pretty quick. I sold my
Right.
company, $45 million a year in sales. From the time we signed a letter of intent to the time we closed was 6 weeks.
Yeah,
But
that's not bad at all.
but the customer was a sophisticated buyer. It was a
Yeah.
$6 billion company, so they didn't have to get financing.
Yeah.
And I would have called myself a sophisticated seller because of all the companies that I bought,
Hmm.
and we hammered through it. But think about all the people, and this is what I talk about in the book. The middle of the book is, who's your team, who's your financial advisor, who's your attorney, and not your estate planning attorney, somebody that's done M&A work.
Yeah.
Do you need a banker, and do they do M&A transact, or I guess really what I should say is, do they lend money to the type of business that you're in? If you got carpenters listening to your show, you said a lot of banks don't want to fund construction companies.
Really?
So, yeah, definitely. So are you at the right bank? Um, you need those people on your team to help you through the transaction.
So whenever you're selling your company, or you're purchasing a company, and you're trying to find the right bank, basically, is the question I'm getting at. If you go the SBA route, like they would match you up with the right bank, right? And also, what's your thoughts on yay or nay SBA type
Uh,
loan?
Especially in the service business, the SBA is where you get a lot of loans done. That's a very interesting question. Here in St. Louis, there is a ton of SBA banks. So if you're going to go with the SBA route, go to a bank, whether it's local or there's a lot of there's SBA things all over, but go to a bank that does SBA loans. They'll know
Hmm.
how to get the paperwork done.
Hmm.
If you go to a bank that does SBA loans, they'll get it done as quick as maybe fair, a regular, about as fast as what you can get a regular loan done. You go to a bank that offers SBA loans, but they only do them here and there.
Right.
You may stumble around trying to get through the paperwork forever.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that here's another warning: bankers are salesmen. So I used to be a banker, so I can throw them under the bus. They're salesmen. They get bonuses on how many loans they make. In an SBA loan, you can stretch the amortization, how long it takes you to pay that loan off, to 10 years. Where I see that a bank is selling you a loan is where the company's been overvalued. They put you on a 10-year amortization schedule, and it barely meets what's called a debt service coverage ratio. It's basically a ratio of, is there enough cash flow to pay for that loan? Um, that's a word of caution. Now, I tell people all the time,
How do you know if that's you, if you're getting stuck in that scenario?
your CPA. One, hopefully you have a banker that understands it, because believe me, when I worked at the bank I worked at, there's some of them guys, they were just paper chasers. They didn't know anything about finance.
Yeah.
But that's why you need a good CPA to help you through that. But you ought to be able to pay for that company. I'm going to say in 5 years, there should be
Yeah.
enough cash flow there to support you getting a salary and to pay for the company in 5 years. Now, if you want to do the SBA route and get a 10-year loan, your loan payment's going to be much smaller. There's nothing wrong with that. What I tell people all the time is, for the first 2 or 3 years, take that lower payment, stuff some cash away. And then when you feel like, you got sufficient working capital to survive a rainy day, so to speak, then go chomp it off and pay, because there's no prepayment penalty. So then go and try and pay it off as quick as you can, if you'd like. But you want to make sure, you build yourself a cushion.
Is there a benefit to paying it off early other than peace of mind?
I mean, peace
So
of mind,
let's say you
interest.
squirrel away some cash, like you said, you keep some cash for a rainy day fund, even if it's 2 years worth of cash flow. I mean, like 2 years worth of overhead expenses, like something crazy. If you had that put away and then you just ran it out for the low payments for 10 years, if you were planning on keeping the business for that long.
It all depends on what your goal is, So I love this term, and I use it in a book, and I talk about it. What's your bankability? Because another thing, I'm in the process of doing a website for the book, and we'll have it on there. You need a debt schedule. What is your total payments? So if I say your debt service coverage ratio, ideally ought to be 2, that means you have $2 in income for every dollar worth of debt. A bank's minimum is typically 1.25, $1.25 in income for every dollar's worth of debt. But man, that's a very leveraged loan. If your debt service coverage ratio is, up in that 2 range or higher, chomp it off and save yourself the interest expense.
Okay. So
If
that's
you want
what
to
you
buy
were
another,
saying, that interest that,
yeah.
What
Yeah,
about whenever you're trying to purchase, like if you're going through a system where you're trying to scale your business up, and so you're wanting to purchase more and more and more businesses, is it advantageous to get that initial loan paid off to get more loans, or are they going to see, well, that particular business is paying for its own loan, so we can ex-nay that and null it out?
You're trying to promote my book, aren't you? No, but I talk about it. So when I first started buying companies, it's all about your bankability. And there's, in the book, in that chapter, I talk about there's basically 2 sides to every loan. Cash, and this is as simple as it gets: cash flow and collateral. If you don't pay it back, what am I going to take of yours that will make me whole? And cash flow, how much cash is flowing for your company to make the payments on this loan? So when I first started buying companies, the first company I bought, I had to do owner financing because I didn't have the collateral or cash flow to buy it. The owner had faith in me. We bought it, paid it off in 5 years. Everything's hunky dory. Then I would still have kind of a banking issue to get those loans because the bank didn't want to look at the cash flow from the company that I was going to buy to help service the debt of that loan because you didn't have any sales contracts with them. What if the customers flee? So when I got to the point where the cash flow from my current company could make the payments on the loan that I needed to buy the next company, that's when the rubber hit the road, and we was buying companies left and right.
Okay.
But it's another thing, and I'm not trying to make this a big sale on Terry, but it is one of the things we talk about in our CEO to CEO coaching program is to keep you bankable, because ideally, you get, before you say 5-10 years before you sell your company, wherever you're at in the life cycle of your business, you need to have a business valuation. So get a realistic idea of what your company's worth. Then your team member who should be a financial advisor tells you you need X number of dollars from the sale of your company to fund your retirement. Well, if your company's worth $1 million and you need 3, let's coach you up. If you're going to grow that company, likely you're going to have to borrow money to, whether it's for an acquisition or buying more trucks or whatever.
So would you even have that conversation with your financial advisor if you're like in your 30s and you've got, like, let's say $20 million a year company and you're looking at selling it? Like, would you even have that retirement conversation, or you just plan on going ahead and investing that money into a different company?
Yes, definitely have that conversation, because so I have 2 mantras. It's not about your company is not about sales and net income. It's about gross profit and cash flow. On the flip side, I don't care what you sell your company for. It's what you get to keep net of taxes. And that was one of the things I didn't do right. I didn't seek the advice of a financial advisor when I sold my company, because what do most owners want when they sell a company? They want a big check, right? Well, guess what? That comes with a big tax liability. And there's ways to structure the sale of your company that could benefit you greatly when you sell the business. In fact, when you write a book, they want you to write a first page. So it's supposed to be something riveting, that keeps you want to turn the rest of the pages. Well, my first page is about me, a company that I actually bought, and we negotiated the purchase price of the company. But there's this little thing called the allocation of the assets. How are you allocating the assets to that purchase price? You, as the seller, want as much money to go towards the asset. I'm sorry, you want to use the seller want as much money to go to goodwill. It's taxed at a lower rate. The buyer is going to want as much money to go to the assets of the company so they can redepreciate them back off. Well, our 2 accountants were butting heads on the allocation of the assets. So I don't know. It's an interesting,
How do you
very true
decide?
story.
I mean, how did you decide on that? Like, is
Well,
that part of the negotiation of the sale?
for me, I ended up calling the owner, and I had to have the allocation of the assets a certain way to satisfy my bank.
Okay.
So I knew it's like his name was shoot, I can't think of it right now, rats, but Jerry. So I had to call Jerry and say, Jerry, this is just the way it's going to have to be. I know it's going to cost you more in taxes, but it is what it is. And he was kind of funny, old guy. He's okay, Terry. That's the way it'll be. I went back in the conference room, told my accountant, run them this way, and we got the deal done.
So in that scenario, though, but if he didn't know that that was what he needed to do, he without any like you could have steamrolled him
Yeah,
if he didn't know that this is how it
right.
needs to be done.
That's why you got to have a team. You know, you don't know what you don't know.
That's yeah. I mean, that's and your coaching program. What does that stand for? The E because it's CETO.
Chief Everything Officer to Chief Executive Officer.
Okay, cool.
So we basically do three things. We really help the business owner understand their financial statements and teach them, 8 to 10 key financial ratios that are, if you know those ratios, and I can teach anybody how to, 8 to 10 ratios, you'll have a pretty good heartbeat on how your company's doing. Your bankability, we talked about that. Are you a bankable person? If you're going to grow a company, can you, are you bankable? And it's not just I got funny stories around that too. And then the third thing is the non-financial things that affect the value of your company. So we do that in one-to-one coaching and or small groups of 5. So
Cool. That's really cool. So
yeah.
how did they get in touch with you to do that?
Website is www.innovativeboyapple.com. My phone number is 618-530-8922. I'm also on LinkedIn, Facebook. You'll find me all over the place.
Cool. Anything else that we want to add other than pick up your copy of the book?
It's a quick read.
How many pages is it? It doesn't look terribly thick.
No, it's not. It takes me maybe about 3 hours to go through. It's only about 130 pages. So,
Oh, yeah.
But at the end of each chapter, there's questions. And believe me, writing a book is a painful thing for me. But the last thing I did was that's called Check Yourself. It's basically questions that talk about the chapter. So that, says describe the importance of a good management team. Well, that goes back to, that's a non-financial thing I just happened to flip that can affect the value of the company. Do you have a management team?
Right.
But when I was writing those questions, that's when it was kind of like the aha moment. It's like,
Right,
you
yeah.
know what, if you read this book and you know the answer to these 75 questions, you'll learn something. So I think we're going to have that available free. There will be a website for the book, www.youdon'tknowwhatyoudon'tknow.com. That's up and coming, and that'll be something, those questions is something you can download for free. But the book's available on Amazon and Kindle right now.
Perfect. Cool.
So,
is there anything I didn't ask that we just got to get it out there?
I think we could do 3 or 4 episodes just on this.
Honestly, I'm right there with you.
So I love acquisitions. I think it's just very important. If you're a current business owner, God, I could tell you most reasons businesses don't sell is because they're overvalued. You have to have a bankable deal.
Mm-hmm.
Could you get that great big multiple from a strategic purchase? Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I did. But you need to have a little bit of a realistic idea also in case you don't hit a home run like that. So
yeah, and it wasn't like you just decided one day to just sell your business. Like you had some sort of plan outright.
I did. Well, I had some, and that's what led me down to the path that I'm doing now, valuing businesses, because, in 2010, and it was like 2008 when I started this process, fuel's $4 a gallon. And let me tell you, you don't have a lot of friends when fuel's $4 a gallon. And 3,000 local customers, the key word being local there.
Local.
I had to hide.
Yeah.
But I had somebody value the company and they told me the value of it. And, I was fortunate. I was like, oh, Jesus, if you can get that far, I'm done. Yeah. I'm done. But the tragic thing is, and I tell another story in the book where people think the company's worth 3 times what it's really worth. And, they're already 65, 68 years old and want to retire, but they can't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's sad.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is like in the different groups that we're part of on Facebook and LinkedIn, I see some wild numbers. They're like, and like they'll say, "Well, I sold my business for this amount," or "I was valued for this amount," and they're like, "Well, if you can sell it for that much, have at it." But
Yeah. I
probably,
was a strategic, I was the largest privately held wholesale fuel and lubricants person in Southern Illinois. And I was a very strategic buy for the company that bought me. And, and one of the things I didn't know about until I sold the company was they needed my lubricants packaging facility. They had just bought a blending facility and they wanted to get in the bulk oil business in Southern Illinois. Well, if they started from scratch, there we go, talking about starting a company
yeah.
from scratch, you got a long road to hoe to
Hmm.
get to where you get a viable thing. If they bought me out, now they have a 500,000 gallons in lubricant sales and a packaging facility, which they needed. So,
Yeah.
so I was a very strategic target.
So make yourself strategic.
Yeah.
Make yourself a target.
And
Cool.
oftentimes those are non-financial things that are going on in the company.
Yeah.
So
All
fun
right.
topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, if you found value in this episode, please, if you're listening, share this content with friends and family. And also, if you're listening to this on your phone, take a screenshot of it, share it on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, especially in Instagram stories, and tag me in it. If we're not
Oh,
connected, then I'd love to connect. Oh yeah, Terry, what you got?
one more thing. If you need a speaker for your association or trade group, I'm happy to do it.
Oh yeah, sweet. So get in contact with Terry. He's a guy full of a wealth of knowledge. His resume is extremely long, and I didn't even read half of it in the intro because you have so much going on, Terry. And I really I appreciate you coming on the show, and I've already ordered my books. So once the new books are out, I want to get some of those also, and I look forward to learning more about you and from you. And I look forward to talking to you again soon on the Service Business Mastery Podcast, the podcast focused on service business owners, managers, and technicians who are considering becoming business owners themselves. Until next time, we'll talk again soon. Be good.
Cheers.